Thank you, Dr. Underwood, for that very kind and generous introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, distinguished regents, faculty, staff, and most especially, graduating Tritons. And your proud parents. I'm honored with this opportunity. 46 years ago, my wife Cheryl and I were smitten by Wanderlust. Longfellow captures our sentiments best. I plowed the land with horses, but my heart was ill at ease. For the old seafaring men came to me now and then with their sagas of the seas. We bid farewell to our old Kentucky homes. We drove across the United States, Canada, all the way to Alaska, and then south to San Francisco. And we put our car on a boat, ship, and we embarked for a journey to an auspicious landfall, Guam. I'll never forget our first fiesta. I read that food table just like the complete history of Guam. I thought this must be what a potluck at the United Nations looks like. And our wanderlust was instantly transmogrified. As Eduardo Galeano puts it, wanderlust became its shadow word, wonderment. We found a multicultural microcosm of that world we wanted to see right here in Guam. And I found my life's work exploring them. As you graduate and as you commence your career, I have a couple of lessons that's going to help you in your pursuit of happiness. First, Guam deserves a better political status, and it shall have one. Second, I learned that teamwork trumps individualism. The Supreme Court of the United States in 1901, in the answer cases, defined Guam as an unincorporated, unorganized territory. That 5-4 racist decision still stands. It states that the people of the U.S. territories shall never be able to understand Anglo-Saxon democratic values, that they will never be fully incorporated into the United States. Other Supreme Court decisions, racist decisions, have been overturned. For example, Dred Scott, Plessy versus Ferguson. Next February, American Samoans will be represented in the District of Columbia Circuit Court of Appeals, and Neil Weir will offer some oral arguments that are going to challenge those insular cases. Neil is a graduate of Southern High School, Guam. He's a graduate of Yale Law School. He got his first research done right here every summer at the University of Guam in the Richard Flores Taitano Micronesian Area Research Center. Since 1901, there's been great improvements in Guam's political status. In 1950, the Organic Act made the people U.S. citizens. It organized the government. But unfortunately, we remain an unincorporated territory. That Organic Act, with all the good that it's done, is at best an apocryphal constitution. And more insidiously, it tends to veil our colonial status. I'd like to introduce you to another Southern High School student, Tricia Santos. She started her college education here and finished at Fordham University in New York. She had a political status epiphany a couple of years ago when Army Reserve Sergeant Tricia Santos from Santa Rita served in Afghanistan. Her commanding officer was really set on all of his soldiers being good citizens and voting in the 2012 presidential election. He made it possible for all of them to get their absentee ballots. Imagine how flabbergasted he was when he learned from Tricia that even though she was a U.S. citizen, because she resided in Guam, she didn't have the privilege of voting for her commander-in-chief. They looked at each other, Tricia and her commanding officer, and they were dumbstruck for a moment to see the irony of their situation. The number one avowed reason that the United States was in the Middle East was for democratic nation building. We are risking lives, and we've lost lives, so that Iraqis and Afghans can vote for their leaders. If we can spend $1 trillion, and more importantly, American lives for Iraqis and Afghans to vote, we can find a way that the people of Guam, the citizens of the United States, have that same right. Our country, the United States of America, was founded on decolonization. You might say that decolonization is American. For George Washington, I have to say, is American as cherry pie. There's so many changes that could happen. Imagine an economy where we weren't hindered by cabotage and the Jones Act. Our transportation costs for airfare and goods to be shipped to Guam could be cut in half. What a boost that would be for the economy. This can happen. Remember in 1962, the National Security, the Navy had a requirement that you had to have permission to enter Guam. When that national security clearance was done away with, and this is a miracle, an economic miracle, in 5 short years, Guam had a nascent tourism industry. In 1967, planes, Pan Am planes, had regular round-trip tickets from Japan to Guam. At that time, the only hotels were Tommy's Travel Lodge and Anigua, it's a Quonset hut. Up in Tutuhan, there was a Cliff Hotel. And then there was an apartment building in Tumon Bay that they called the Fajita Hotel. Think of what's happened with that little political status change. And there's more of that in Guam's future. Right now, this is sort of on the back burner, political status. But it's never going to be off the stove until justice is done. I want to share with you some thoughts from a great statesman, Frederick Douglass, over 150 years ago. And I'm going to paraphrase him. But when you ask for civil rights, when you ask for better political status from the federal government, you're not asking for a gift, not asking for a favor. You're only asking an answer to this question. Will our country live up to its own principles? That is, there's no government that's legitimate without the consent of the government. That equality means equality. and that we truly have a government of and by and for the people. Another lesson that I've learned is that it's much better if you can work with a team than as an individual. This sort of flies in the face of my stateside training. I was taught to be self-reliant. I was taught even every man for himself. But I learned a couple of key concepts in Guam. Anafa Malik and Toto Manatungu. Anafa Malik can be defined as interdependence, cooperation, working together, literally to make it good for each other. And Toto Manatungu is translated as consensus decision making. Throughout my career, I have found that when I was able to have teamwork, my goals were reached much more quickly than as an individual. Of course, Chamorro culture does not have a monopoly on those social characteristics. As a matter of fact, anything you find in one culture, you'll find in another. For example, hospitality. All cultures have it. But we know we have more of it on Guam than, say, New York City. So it's a matter of emphasis. And in many of the islands, the emphasis is on harmony. Many scholars have seen the advantage of looking at a myth and being able to use that as a window into the soul and the heart of a culture. In Chamorro, ancient Chamorro mythology, out of nothingness, out of a void, was born a brother and sister, Punta and Fuona. In other cultures, the creator is God the Father, or the creator is God the Mother. But not in Chamorro mythology. It's gods, the brother and sister, the siblings of Chelu. If the gods need teamwork, if they need help from one another, what does that tell us as mortals? There's an emphasis on Anafa Malik and consensus decision making. Let me give you a couple of examples. And one of my successes and also one of my failures. And they both hinge on these concepts. I wrote a book, Ancient Chamorro Society. That book was recognized in a best-selling educational research book as an exemplary research and development project. The American Library Association put it in their choice books for 1992. My background tells me to crow about that. But I acknowledge 80 people in that book. And that book would not be successful without all 80 of their help. There's some of them here tonight, and I'd like to particularly say thank you to Dr. Bernardita Camacho Doka and Dr. and President Robert A. Underwood. They and 78 other subject matter experts, culture experts, curriculum experts, artists, made that book what it is. I've had a failure, a recent failure. I belonged to an organization and we operated and accomplished all kinds of things in 10 years. And we elected our officers and made all of our decisions by consensus decision making. And then voting crept in. And that organization is now 4 organizations. It fractured, it splintered, because we were not able to continue doing things in a harmonious way. The best known of those two groups are Tasi. We have a canoe house down at the Paseo de Susana, and Tasa, and they have a canoe house at Ipao Beach. Instead of one strong organization, we have 4 weaker organizations. These concepts, Anafamalak and Tolomantungo, are not panaceas. The ancient Chamorros had plenty of conflict. They had wars. They even had clan fission. But it's a matter of emphasis. I'd like to give you an example from another island culture. In 1969, my wife and I visited Yap proper. A man named Garansai allowed us to camp on his property in Wanad Village. It's a fishing, farming community, thatched houses. There's no roads, no cars. And every time it was mealtime, children popped up with these breadfruit leaf platters full of cooked fish, sweet potatoes, and taro. It was an idyllic life we lived there. One day, Garansai invited me to a housewarming party, about a mile and a half south of where we were staying. The next day, my wife and I woke up that next morning. We're in an insouciant mood. We're going to a party. We're all excited. It's a beautiful, sunshiny day. It was on the windward side of the island. And as I said, there were no roads. The paths weren't dirt paths. They were these Japanese grass paths. Looked like a linear golf green. And on our left was a reef at low tide, a beautiful indigo sea beyond, and stately palm trees and stands of maple. And on our right, as we walked along, there were jungle interspersed with hibiscus flowers and these fertile taro patches. Even before we reached the party, we could smell the fresh leaf on it. And finally we saw that new roof glowing in the noon sun. And then we saw about 3 dozen men. They were shirtless. The younger ones wore loincloths, and the older men wore hibiscus or hoaxy fiber tubes. I saw my friend Garansai. He came up with this big breadfruit eating grin. And then he saw my wife, and his face completely changed. He took us and he led us away, and he says, "You stay here and I'll be back." He came back in an hour. I was fortunate enough to find out what happened during that hour. They debated whether my wife should be allowed to come to the party. Everybody wanted us to have a good time. Some thought that my wife should come because she doesn't count, she's not Yapese. Some said, "Oh no, I checked her out, she's a woman, and she may not be Yapese, but she shouldn't be at a bench party." Some thought that any attention they gave my wife might be misinterpreted by me and cause conflict. I could be jealous. In the end, the consensus decision was, look, we want this guy to come here and have a good time. We know he can't have a good time with his wife here. Furthermore, he can't drink as much as he wants if his wife's here. So she can't come. But here's where the Anafamalak part comes in. They sent runners to find out if they could manage a women's party. And they came back with a positive response. They began to weave these yellowish green coconut leaves into baskets that were truly work of art. They filled them with food. They gathered drinking coconuts. They decorated the baskets with flowers. They came on site, escorted my wife in this caravan of food for a woman's party. And I went to the men's party. You see, it wasn't enough just to get a consensus decision. They had to make it good for everyone. And they did. It took time. And this is the part that most people miss about Anafamalak. It takes sacrifice. Remember what happened to Buntan in that origin myth. It takes sacrifice and sharing. It's not easy. But the harmonious way is the most productive way. Recently, my daughter, Dr. Kim Tai Cruz, and her talented husband found some research about morale and how it affects the workplace, and how much more productive people are when you have a harmonious atmosphere and climate. And it even affects things like school achievement. That way, the Island Way, will serve you well in your new careers. My wife, my bride of 50 years, yes, 50 years, would never let me live it down if I didn't bring in the wonderment part. Take time to smell the Bavarian. Take time and open yourself to Guam, Guam's people, and its unspeakable beauty. If I can modify a Robert Louis Stevenson couplet that my precocious granddaughter Alana really likes, and I think it'll express my wife's sentiment. Guam is so full of a number of things. I'm sure we should all be as happy as kings. Take time to nap. Take time to cha-cha. Take time to listen to the music. And listen to the sound of the rain on a tin roof. Listen to the ubiquitous cocks crow. Listen to the heart-healing chant of the tetra. And by all means, always be ready to heed these most noble words. Shoot! Let's barbecue! Guam is good. And this graduating Triton class, fall 2014, is going to make Guam even better. Even better. I salute you on this joyous day, in this holy season. God bless us each and every one. Danke los Jus Masi. Thank you.